Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive, where we take a closer look at some of the most interesting developments shaping the world. Today, we're going to be talking about something pretty important.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into the world of steel. More specifically, green steel in India.
It's a hot topic.
Definitely is. And we've got a fascinating source to guide us. A brand new press release straight from the Indian government, outlining their fresh, new definition of green steel.
Fresh off the press.
Exactly. So let's paint a picture here for our listeners. Imagine you're in the market, looking to source steel from India. How can you tell what's truly green? What sets it apart?
Well, it's a great question because up to this point, there's been a lot of talk about green steel, but not a lot of consistency.
Right.
Everyone's using the term, but what does it actually mean?
Exactly.
It's been kind of this Wild West situation, and India is actually trying to wangle that with this new definition.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics here. What is India actually doing to define green steel?
So India's rolled out this really interesting three-tier system, like a rating system.
Yeah, like a rating system, sort of.
Kind of like when you look at energy efficiency for appliances.
Oh, okay, I see.
But for steel.
Right.
This is based on carbon emissions. How much CO2 equivalent is emitted for every ton of steel produced?
CO2 equivalent, that's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, but it's important here. CO2 equivalent, or we can call it CO2e, it takes into account all greenhouse gases, not just carbon dioxide, right?
Right, so it's the bigger picture.
Exactly. Each gas has a different global warming potential, so we got to convert them to the CO2 equivalent so we can compare them all. Makes sense.
Makes total sense. I think a lot of our listeners are already familiar with the concept, but good to clarify for those who aren't. Okay, so you've got this rating system, this three-tier system. What are the actual levels?
So at the very top, the creme de la creme, you've got the 5-star green steel.
5 stars. Sounds impressive.
Very impressive and very green.
Yeah.
To achieve this prestigious rating, your emissions need to be below 1.6 tons of CO2e per ton of steel produced.
Wow, so that's the, what would you say, the gold standard?
Yeah, I think gold standard is a pretty good way to put it. This is the kind of steel you might find in like a cutting-edge green building.
Okay, yeah. LED certified skyscraper.
Exactly. Or a brand new electric vehicle factory. You know, projects that really want to prioritize sustainability.
Got it. So that's your top tier. What comes next?
Next up, we've got the 4-star green steel. Still good, still green.
Still respectable.
Definitely. Emissions for this tier fall between 1.6 and 2.0 tons of CO2e.
Okay, and then rounding out your 3 tiers.
You got it. We have the 3-star green steel.
Bringing up the rear.
Yeah, bringing up the rear, but still considered green steel, just squeaks in there.
Okay.
For this tier, you're looking at emissions between 2.0 and 2.2 tons of CO2e per ton of steel.
All right, so 3 tiers, each with their own emission levels. Now, I'm guessing, and tell me if I'm wrong, anything above that 2.2 doesn't even qualify as green steel, right?
You are absolutely correct.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. Anything above that threshold, it's just conventional steel in India. No green label for you.
So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the listener for a second. Imagine you're a steel manufacturer in India. I mean, this new system really puts the pressure on to clean up your act, doesn't it?
There's definitely pressure, but it's a win-win situation, in my opinion. You get to contribute to a greener planet, and there are also some potential economic benefits here.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If Indian steelmakers can really step up their game and meet these standards, it could give them a real competitive edge in the global market.
Especially with so many countries trying to become more sustainable.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of focus on green procurement policies, eco-conscious consumers, and there's definitely a growing demand for sustainably produced materials. So India could really capitalize on this trend.
So it's not just a shift within India, but it could have this ripple effect across the entire global steel market.
Sure.
It's a bold move, and, I think it's a move in the right direction. Now, I do have a question, though.
Sure.
How do you, as a buyer, actually know that a steel supplier is living up to these standards? Like, is there any oversight or third-party verification? Is someone checking?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. And the press release does address that, thankfully.
Okay, good.
They're talking about putting together a pretty robust verification system.
What does that look like?
It could involve things like independent audits of steel plants. They're also looking at life cycle assessments, where they actually delve into the entire production process to assess the environmental impact.
And making sure it all lines up with the claims being made.
Exactly. They even mentioned exploring blockchain technology.
Blockchain for steel.
Yeah, wild, right?
It is pretty wild.
The idea is to track emissions throughout the entire supply chain, from the raw materials all the way to the final product.
I mean, that sounds really high tech. Very impressive, very thorough, but it also sounds potentially expensive. Do you think this whole verification process and this new focus on green steel, is it going to drive up the cost of steel in India?
I think it's a valid concern, and it is possible. In the short term, we might see a premium on green steel as manufacturers invest in these cleaner technologies and implement the verification systems.
Makes sense.
But, as with most things, as production scales up, as innovation comes in, as we see those economies of scale, the cost could start to come down.
Right. So initially maybe a bit of a price hike, but over time, potentially a more level playing field.
Exactly. And the benefits of switching to greener practices could outweigh the costs in the long run.
For sure. Now, what about the Indian government themselves? Are they leading by example here? Are they actually walking the talk?
It seems like they're taking it seriously. The press release mentions that they're looking into mandating the use of green steel in all government infrastructure projects.
Wow. So roads, bridges, buildings, everything.
It seems like they're heading in that direction.
I mean, that is a massive amount of steel we're talking about.
A huge market.
If they actually follow through with this, that's going to send a very strong signal to the market, to the whole industry.
Oh, yeah. It would be a huge boost for green steel in India and could really accelerate that transition.
It's almost like they're creating their own built-in demand.
Exactly, yeah. Sort of jump-starting the whole process.
Very interesting. Now, there was one thing that really stood out to me in the press release. It's that this whole definition of green steel, these levels, this three-tier system, it's not set in stone, right?
You're right. It seems like they're taking a flexible approach, which is smart because, technology is always evolving.
Right. And our understanding of sustainability, our knowledge of emissions is always getting more refined.
Exactly. So the government is planning to review and potentially revise this definition every 3 years.
So it's an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time thing.
They're acknowledging that things are changing and they need to adapt.
Now, you've got me thinking. If India's doing this, do you think other countries might follow suit?
It's a good question. Could this be the start of a global standard for green steel?
It would certainly make things a lot easier, wouldn't it?
For everyone, for manufacturers, for buyers, for consumers, for the planet. So yeah, it's definitely something worth watching closely.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to a really important point for our listeners.
What's that?
If you're involved in construction, manufacturing, really any industry that uses steel, this is something you need to be paying attention to.
Couldn't agree more.
I mean, think about it. How could this new definition of green steel, how could these new standards impact your decisions, your projects, even your bottom line?
It's a world of steel, but it's changing. And it's exciting to see these developments unfolding.
I think exciting is the right word. It's a whole new era for steel, and it's definitely something we'll continue to watch closely here at the Deep Dive.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all our listeners for tuning in.
Until next time.